The whole town stood in shock as Ronnie's Navy mates carried his casket. The 700 mourners, virtually the whole town's population, was a reflection of the respect the young man had earned in his 22 years as a friend, son, husband and father. Among the crowd, his young wife and his parents. The under-13 footballers he coached also paid their respects. Ironically, Ronnie was fatally hit only hours after the rugby league team he played for, Northern Lakes, won its first game in 50 matches. Ronnie leaves behind a young son, Nicholas.
It was an accident which you'd expect on a country road or a highway, not a quite suburban street. It occurred at around 1:30 this afternoon. The passenger of the Daihatsu Charade trapped by her legs for well over an hour. The impact crushed the front of both vehicles. Police rescue, the fire brigade and ambulance officers had a difficult task freeing the young woman. She suffered serious internal head and leg injuries. The rescue helicopter flew her to John Hunter Hospital. The 36-year-old male driver of the Charade, who is also from Marks Point, was taken to Belmont Hospital by road. He received minor injuries. Also taken to hospital, the 22-year-old driver of the Honda CRX from Valentine. The accident investigation squad is looking into the cause of the crash, but at this stage it's believed the Charade may have swerved into oncoming traffic.
It would appear at this stage the vehicle travelling toward Belmont crossed to the incorrect side of the roadway.
Traffic was diverted from the accident scene. Crowders Bay Road was finally cleared at around 3:30. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
Some were looking at cashing in the keepsakes. Others wouldn't part with their treasures collected over a lifetime. Dozens of items went under the eyeglass for checks on authenticity and condition. Trained experts from International Conservation Services made the trip to Tamworth to turn up the odd interesting find and offer restoration treatment for those treasures time is starting to get the better of. From amid the bric-a-brac and even a family Bible, a Norman Lindsay original valued at around $20,000. Just one of the more surprising turn-ups of the day.
The Falcons floundered in the first quarter, their key players everywhere but on target. Perth streaked ahead by 10 points, guard Ricky Grace taking charge. But then Newcastle stepped up a gear. Newcastle hit the lead 35-34 with a Jensen Alexander 1-2. Then Dozier, Rucker and McLean chipped in. The Falcons led by 4 at half-time, stretching that to 20 points in the third quarter. This largely due to the man of the match, Michael Johnson, who cracked 8 three-pointers for the game, 5 of those in the final break. Newcastle were running hot and the record crowd loved every minute of it. With the Falcons sinking the baskets and forcing the turnovers, fifth place Perth had no answers. Newcastle home easy 111-80. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
GD Mackay's sawmill had a get-together of family, customers and employees past and present today.
Between 400 and 500 people here, all of whom are enjoying meeting all their old mates and friends and relations, and it's really been great fun.
The mill opened in 1925. It was steam-powered back then, and while it now runs on electricity, there have been few other modifications to the original operation. The business is still family-owned and employs 12 workers. The village of Wards River grew up around the mill, which supplies hardwood mostly to Newcastle and Sydney, but there were the heady days when the timber was eagerly sought on the export market. These days, wood comes from pockets of privately owned land and forests around the Gloucester and Barrington tops. Asked about the future of the old-fashioned mill, its owners reply, "Ask us that again in 10 years' time."
Been a bit of a battle the last few years because the timber industry, as you know, has been in quite severe doldrums, but we're still battling on and keeping our men. We haven't had to put anybody off.
It's just another day in the roping ring for some. There are barrel and breakaway events, team steer and calf wrestling and roping. Held by the Premier State Team Event Association, the two-day competition features a cash jackpot as well. There are the seasoned steer wrestlers and ropers and an open invitation to others keen to try their hand at the sport.
Pretty lucky being here in Tamworth. We've got guys like Jeff Miller, who's been 5 times the Australian champion, David Hallam, who's been the Australian champion on the professional circuit team roper.
The competition builds to a big indoor display later this year at Tamworth, which coincides with its State of Origin roping challenge.
This was the inferno at Toronto High School that raged for nearly 3 hours. A security officer raised the alarm just before 4:30 this morning. 6 fire brigades, the hazmat and backup bushfire units all called to the scene. It's believed the fire started in the ground floor section, quickly engulfing science labs, art, music, computer and staff rooms, as well as 15 general classrooms. About 50 firefighters battled to save what they could, the intense heat and smoke hampering their efforts. It's a tragedy for both teachers and children at the school. Year 12 art students lost precious work which cannot be replaced.
They've already been advised by their teachers this morning that their works have been damaged in the fire, so that is very disheartening for somebody coming up for their high school certificate.
Forced into crisis management, Education Department officials were tallying the losses. A number of adjacent classrooms suffered severe smoke damage. The total cost estimated at about $3 million. Following a statewide push for better security, the school's recently installed electronic surveillance system has helped identify the alleged arsonist. Police were today interviewing a 21-year-old suspect apprehended by a security officer shortly after the blaze started. He's believed to be a former student. The school is planning to reorganise timetables. Students and staff returning tomorrow from their holiday break will be offered counselling. Melinda Smith, NBN News. The arsonist's first target was Western's Ambulance Community Hall in Station Street. Neighbours reported hearing a loud explosion which shook nearby houses around 11:30 last night. The blaze severely damaged the rear section of the premises. The kitchen area was completely gutted.
A number of neighbours called the fire brigade out. We've had a look at that and we believe that entry was forced to the hall prior to the fire and that it was probably deliberately lit.
The next attack took place only a short distance away in 4th Street. This cleanaway bin in a plumbing yard was set alight around 1 a.m. 5 hours later, the arsonist struck a third time, returning to the site and setting fire to an old van. The owner used the vehicle to store tools and equipment valued at more than $2,000. A neighbour reported a possible suspect running from the scene down Klein Street. He's described as in his late teens, around 175 centimetres tall, thin build, wearing dark black jeans and a hooded grey coloured pullover. Police are calling for anyone with information to come forward.
Well, it's always a concern. At this stage, she's only supplied a property of, that's not occupied, but who knows what goes through their minds and what they might sort of progress to.
300 artists with the scissors and the colours went to work at the Newcastle Workers Club for a crack at the state and then national titles. Hairdressers from the North Coast, North West and Hunter regions. It was a tense atmosphere, the competitors trying to get that cut above the others. They teased the judges with some slick styles. But the big winners were the models. They got a free trip to the hairdresser. Normally, quality like this doesn't come cheap. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The fire took hold in a matter of minutes. About 50 firefighters from 6 brigades could do little as the blaze quickly engulfed science, art, music, computer, staff rooms and 15 general classrooms. Police say an arsonist is to blame. The fire was deliberately lit in one of the ground-level science labs around 4:30 a.m. yesterday. The school's electronic surveillance system tipped off a security guard. A 21-year-old man is being questioned by police. Students and staff returning from their holidays were horrified at the full extent of the damage caused in the $3 million blaze.
Devastated. Honestly, just shocked by it. Just got no idea what to do.
Most people just can't believe that it's happened, can't believe it's actually our school that's been burnt down.
Like, what are we supposed to do? This is our HSC year. It's nothing, it's just not what we don't need.
Workers continued the enormous clean-up job, smoke and heat severely damaging the upper section of an adjacent building. At an assembly this morning, students were briefed about changes to timetables. All except Year 12 were sent home. It'll be another week before the school's 900 students return to normal lessons. Already a huge operation is underway to build temporary accommodation.
Well, there will be 40 mountables brought in. There's one in at present. By the end of the week there should be about 12, by next Monday about 15, and after a couple of weeks we hope the whole 40 will be in here.
Melinda Smith, NBN News. The complex on Lake Road at Wallsend caters for preschool through to Year 12 students. Construction of Stage 1 began in February and is almost completed, ready for the arrival of students commencing third term.
The completion of the preschool and K to 12 is fully operational, and that entails the primary school, as well as the design and technology building facilities, the science laboratory, computer laboratory, all the specialist areas to get up and operational.
The $7 million project will be carried out in 4 stages, including a church, community centre and gymnasium, retirement village, as well as a number of sports grounds. The final completion date set for 1998. The school offers Christian education, filling what it describes as a growing need in the community.
Primarily to provide an educational program in a Christian educational setting, where Christian values are seen to be an important part of our educational thrust.
Traditionally considered an expensive treat on any restaurant menu, the tasty lobster is set to become a rarity.
Local fresh, if you can buy them, they're just too expensive. And the frozen Tassie crays, which we were buying for a little while, now are just gone over the moon with price as well.
What's angered many restaurant owners is that they're being cut out of a competitive market. Of the available lobsters, most are being exported. When the government recently introduced its quota management plan, fishermen were outraged.
The fishermen are having a hard time because their quota's been set probably about a third of their normal catch, especially over the last 12 months. And I think it's going to be a downturn in their income.
Lobster prices have soared to around $60 a kilo in Sydney. At Newcastle, market prices have peaked at $45. With a potential revenue of around $750,000 a year, lack of sales could result in a loss of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Well, at this stage we're just waiting to see whether the quotas come in on different other species to see how it affects the co-op. We expect a downturn in the returns to all fishermen in our area, so we've just got to wait and see what happens.
The industry is lobbying the government to ease up on restrictions. Until that happens,
As far as we're concerned, we are not serving lobsters again. But there's just nothing on the grapevine that says that they will be available in the near future.
Melinda Smith, NBN News.
About 25 people are in a class at Newcastle University studying a subject which is getting on the nose in our region. It's called the Wastewater Technicians Training Course, or what to do with domestic wastewater in unsewered areas. Places like Karua, Clarencetown and Seahampton are not connected to the system. Untreated sewage from these areas is seeping into our waterways. Some people are installing aerobic wastewater treatment systems on their properties to defuse the problem. They cost thousands of dollars, but are they being used properly?
If people are going to the expense of spending money on this sort of system, that they should be maintained and run properly. And of course the environment benefits too.
New Australian standards are being brought in, and the uni course is advising people on the right way to address a growing community concern. Still on the environment, and good news from the Environmental Protection Authority on the water quality of our oceans. 2 years into a 4-year study, tests on oysters placed in the harbour and off the sewage treatment works show low levels of contaminants. Oysters filter the water, picking up any foreign bodies. There were some elements of pesticides and trace metals, but they were well within recommended safety standards.
Currently, if you want to use Optus for international or national calls, you have to dial 1 and then the number. But come September, residents of the 049 and 043 area codes will have the choice of automatic access to the new carrier. On September 14, all residents will receive a letter asking them to choose between Telecom or Optus for long-distance calls. In other areas, Optus has secured up to 20% of all lines. They're confident of a similar result in the Hunter and on the Central Coast.
If we get 10% or better of the pre-selectable lines through the ballot, then we'll be absolutely delighted.
If a resident chooses not to vote, then they stay with Telecom. Northern Region Director of Optus, John Filmer, believes it's important everyone has a say.
Smoke could be seen billowing from the scrapyard of Balcombe Recyclers for several kilometres. The fire broke out around 1:30 this afternoon as a worker operating a mobile shearer attempted to cut some scrap metal.
It was in the process of removing some scrap from our sort of process stockpile, and it's picked up something inside the scrapyard and thrown a spark into a bit of rag or something. We don't really know what it is.
Firefighters were on the scene within minutes, isolating the blaze to a small area of the scrapyard, metal, tyres and wood going up in smoke. The outbreak was contained within 30 minutes, officers having to carefully sift through the stockpile to get to the seat of the blaze. No one was injured. The company and fire brigade are investigating the cause. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Senator Neil looked through Tobwabba Art, an Aboriginal art organisation operating through Foster's Skillshare. Tobwabba has been operating for almost 2 years and after starting from scratch now markets Australia-wide and is looking at export potential. Tobwabba Art is soon to be seen on knitwear and luggage and already adorns umbrellas.
Joanna Wally is 17 years old and plays off a 4 handicap. She has the South Australian and New South Wales junior titles to her name. A fortnight ago, she finished runner-up in the Victorian Junior Open. Next month, she captains the New South Wales secondary schools team at the National Championships in Melbourne. While confident in her game, the quietly spoken teenager remains realistic about the task ahead.
I think I'm all right. I think that there's a lot of improvement there, but I'll keep trying.
And what does she think about out on the green?
Yeah, I try not to think too much about my swing or anything. I just basically just get up and hit the ball.
Can it be a bit dangerous if you think too much?
I think so. I think some people get a bit too technical.
Acknowledging the enormous leap from amateur to professional ranks, Joanna is taking one step at a time, finishing school first, then concentrating on her golf. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
These are the American women trying to beat Australians at their own game. 15-year-old Sarah Boole and 16-year-old Claire Oboe are from California. 17-year-old Dallas Hubner from rich farmland near New York. They're in week 3 of a month-long tour of Australia, aimed at improving their form on the paddock. Their indoctrination into polocrosse, Australian style, has been a hard but rewarding experience.
Their A grade's about our B grade because they're a lot tougher too. They're more conscious about what they're doing. We're kind of just out there running around and they're knowing what they're doing.
It's fun because they're a lot nicer. Like everyone in my area hates each other, so you're playing against people you hate. Here you can play against people you can actually be friends with at the same time.
They'll play for Muswellbrook at Maitland's Polocrosse Carnival this weekend. One of 45 teams entered in men's, women's and junior divisions. The sport is lobbying to become an exhibition sport at the year 2000 Olympics, but is still fighting to establish its own identity. What's the difference between polocrosse and the game that Prince Charles plays?
Polocrosse is a one-horse sport. You play one horse for the weekend, and that's the main thing. Is it's within the reach of all players from 5-year-old to 95, and it's very much a family sport.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
He said at 2:36.
We first introduced you to Conan last week when he alerted his owner to a fire and vandalism attack at a nearby school. Since then, he's had an adventure to rival any. You see, Conan disappeared. He went walkabout attending a neighbouring spit roast, but a kindly soul believed he was missing and posted a sign on her gate. Conan was claimed by a Swansea man who thought he was his Rottweiler.
I'm going down there, found Conan in this yard, and were being well looked after down there, and this guy unfortunately genuinely thought he had his dog back.
To cut a long story short, there was a custody battle. Conan was remarkably similar to the missing dog. He even had a mark over his left eye. And yes, he answers to anything.
It was disputed property down at their place there, so he was taken into police custody, taken away in a police paddy wagon, put in their jail cell, then taken over to the pound where he was looked after for 2 days.
What eventually proved Conan's identity was this patch of fur where he'd sat in chewing gum, a series of family photos, and our footage from days before. It was to the relief of all concerned that Conan was returned to his rightful home.
The matter was listed to go before Belmont Local Court yesterday at lunchtime, but fortunately for all concerned, the parties involved went to the Community Justice Centre at Newcastle and were able to come up with a decision there which saw Conan go back to the Halsteads.
So how's he handling his newfound stardom?
He seems to be fine. All he wants to do is go straight back up through that block of land again and back to where this Rottweiler and the spit roast were. That's all he seems to be interested in doing at the moment. So.
Like that's why she was. But you look at the difference. I'll get the pen ring and show you the difference. Like that's why she was. But you look at the difference. I'll get the pen ring and show you.
The Knights have won their last 4 games. The highlight, last weekend's historic defeat of Brisbane. Mentally, it was an enormous boost for Newcastle. Coach David Waite doesn't believe there'll be any letdown following that triumph.
We've been playing pressure games now for the last 10 weeks, of which we've won 8 of them. So if we can maintain that sort of mental approach on Sunday and start the game well, I believe that we can enjoy another victory.
Newcastle is now placed equal 5th on the ladder, with Souths 1 point behind. The pressure is mounting, but just like at training this week, the teams put their heads down, concentrating on the business end of Sunday's clash.
From my point of view, and I'm sure from the senior first graders' point of view, the South Sydney game is an incredibly vital one for us. And they're ones that traditionally have been problems for us.
The Rabbitohs have never beaten Newcastle at Marathon Stadium, but this season have shown they're capable of causing upsets. Captain Craig Field instrumental in South's successes.
He's an exciting player, but probably no more exciting than our young halfback, so that'll be worth the price of admission, the little contest around the scrum base.
Knight's lineup remains as announced earlier this week. Mark Sargent missed training this afternoon because of a stomach virus. However, Coach Waite doesn't think that'll keep the big man out of Sunday's game. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
South had won 7 straight games going into the clash and was pushing for a spot in the top 3. Minutes into the game and South had cruised to an 8-0 lead. The Tars cause not helped by the sin binning of David Snedden for dissent. South spread the ball to take advantage of its extra player. Tim Butler continued his good form from last week to pick up the try. South's winning 18-4. In today's other games, West beat Curry and the Maitland Lakes game is still in progress. Last night it was the battle of the cellar dwellers when Central Charlestown and the Blue hosted the Cessnock Goannas. The visitors had only won 3 games this season, 3 more than Central. Andrew Whipp sent Mark Smith away as Cessnock set itself for victory number 4. The Central defence that has allowed more than 1,000 points to be scored against it opened up to give Cessnock its second. The Butcher Boys tried hard all night, but was still 36 points behind the second worst team in the comp, losing 40-4. Michael Johnson got Newcastle off to a flying start. Tony Jensen continued his good form. Newcastle couldn't miss as it went to a 29-16 lead after the first quarter. The second section belonged to Illawarra's Melvin Thomas. If he wasn't bamboozling the Falcons under the basket, he was confusing the commentators with shots like this. He even gave an impromptu rehearsal for a place in the Illawarra Steelers League side. The gap had closed to 6 by half-time, the Hawks hitting the front in the third quarter. The teams were deadlocked at 85 all with 2 minutes to go. The Falcons had chances to seal the game, but the Hawks finished it off. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.